بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. وَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَىٰ أَعْدَائِهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. First of all, I want to offer my condolences during these auspicious days where we're remembering the burdens of His Holiness Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his family and companions. When we discuss the reality of who we are, the reality of me, the reality of I, the first person singular, we see that this me, this I, is multi-layered. It's multi-dimensional, and that's very easy to apprehend whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, because you say my hand, and hand is a physical reality. You say I dreamt. Dreaming is a semi-immaterial reality. You say I was inspired or I thought. These are immaterial realities. So when you just look at yourself and introspect, very easily you come to this notion that me, I am multi-layered, multi-dimensional. And here we see that some layers, some dimensions are superior to others. Some dimensions are permanent. Some dimensions of me are permanent. Some dimensions of me are temporary and temporal. When it comes to the physical dimension of me, of I, whatever is physical has a beginning and an end. Any given thing in the physical realm, it has a beginning and it ends and decomposes, becomes something else, and so on and so forth. But when we speak of immaterial dimensions of the I, here the story is different. Whenever an immaterial reality is established within you, that immaterial thing, whatever it be, is eternal. And philosophers have proven that immaterial things never end. Once they become actualized, they are until eternity. So see, that's something very important. For those who are more acute, they've proven qiyamah already with those two sentences. When the immaterial dimensions of you, be it your thoughts, your intentions, your beliefs, what you think, good or bad of others, and so on and so forth. These immaterial realities which are established, once established, first of all, it's you. It's not separate from you. It's part of who you are. And since it's eternal, it's always going to be with you. And immaterial realities never end. They don't decompose. Whatever is established within you, within your immaterial dimensions, they are with you until the very end. Now, questions may arise in relation to repentance and other things. Inshallah, over time, I may discuss that. But this is a very important notion, that immaterial realities don't end. Now, 1/3 of the Holy Quran is in relation to Qiyamah. And Qiyamah is an immaterial reality. And there you see many of the exegetes, when they give the tafsir on verses of Qiyamah, on verses of heaven and hell, verses on shafa'ah, verses on repentance, you see they're giving a materialistic interpretation. It falls into problems. I'll give examples over time during the next few nights. But it's a problem. When some people say that there's nothing immaterial but Allah, this is a gross misinterpretation of many things. Everything is material, according to some theologians. It's in their books, of old and of new. But Allah, that's the most simplest of introspections can refute such a position. And moreover, the interpretations that they bring out are all materialistic. It's as if Qiyamah, whatever we have and experience in this world, is just of a different nature. It's all physical. And then also the philosophers in relation to immaterial realities. One, they said that, or have said, once an immaterial reality is established, it's there for good, eternal. Also, they say when an immaterial reality is actualized, self-consciousness arises simultaneously. Whatever is immaterial is self-conscious. Look, we have to read these books. Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Omari, Rahmatullah alayh, has many books in this field. He's proven Tawheed, Nubuwwah, Ma'ad, with the simplest of, philosophical deductions, without using any verse of the Holy Quran. Useful for Muslims and non-Muslims. And when we speak of artificial intelligence and these robots and similar things, it's all material at the end of the day. It's all a simulation. It's programmed to simulate. It's all traced back to 0 and 1. That 0 and 1 is material. However much they advance, at the end of the day, the robot or whatever thing is not self-conscious. They can pretend to be, and they can simulate a self-conscious entity, but they're not self-conscious. It's impossible. It's a material thing. So, here, whatever is immaterial is eternal. It will never end. It can't end. Once established, once actualized. Be it beliefs, actions, and so on and so forth. And whatever is immaterial is self-conscious. So then the question arises, this me, this I, which we started off with in the talk, this me, when did I arise? When did I commence or begin? At the stage of the zygote, there's an organism, there's no doubt. And once the zygote, the egg is fertilized and the embryo, the unicellular embryo or zygote is established, aborting it is haram. And before ensoulment, there are some exceptions. After ensoulment, the exceptions are much less. But at the level of the zygote, is there an I? The answer is a definite no. Now, Catholics want to say it has a soul, a human soul. And even medicine has proved this is wrong. Cloning has proved this is wrong. Many medical experiments have proven this is wrong. When they get the 4-cell embryo. They've done this with animals, and they've divided the 4-cell embryo into 4 single cells at the 4-cell stage of the embryo. And they put each cell in a different womb, animal womb, and then you had 4 animals being given birth to. If that 4-cell embryo had a human soul, how can something which is immaterial then be divided into 4? Well, that's something very simple. There's no I at the zygote level. It's something physical. Look, there is a soul, but the soul is a vegetative soul. It's not an immaterial soul. And then this fetus in the womb of the mother is evolving, is growing, is being nurtured by the mother. And then at some time, you see that it acquires immaterial perceptions. For example, it escapes from danger. It hears, for example, at some stage within the womb. And even if it doesn't hear within the womb, it perceives the I itself. It perceives itself. And these perceptions are all immaterial. They didn't exist at day 1, or the first week, or the first month. It may have moved out of gravity or a reflex, but there was no voluntary movement. But then it sensorially perceives certain things, albeit at a rudimentary level. And those sensory perceptions, look, when you touch something, that's a sensory perception. The hand isn't touching it. Something else is perceiving that. That something else is immaterial. When you're seeing, this eye isn't seeing, the soul is seeing. If you put the eye on a piece of table or whatever, it's nothing. It's something material. The soul is seeing, the soul is tasting, touching, hearing. Seeing won't apply as much because it's in a dark womb. But these are sensory, immaterial perceptions at a very rudimentary level. It's where the eye commences, when the first sensory perceptions arise. Yes, the brain, which is a physical entity, has an important role as an instrument for one to perceive these seeing and touching and tasting. Without the brain, the eye may not arise for this fetus, if the fetus was anencephalic, for example. So now the Sharia has given 4 lunar months as a red line. It's an estimate, 1400 years ago they've given it. But let's say voluntary movement is substantiated before that. You have to see it as a human being. You have to treat it as insolvent having happened. It's very difficult to establish, but it may be possible. But 4 lunar months, that's a deadline. At 4 lunar months, you can presume that what's inside the womb, now there's an I, it's a person. The I has started. And this I now, this immaterial reality, even though it's rudimentary, it's going to remain until forever. It's an eternal being. Now, whatever perceptions are added, this just adds to those immaterial realities and adds to the I. The I grows immateriality after immateriality, thought after thought. Now it's after it's being born and after a number of years, then it grows after puberty. Thought after thought, belief after belief, action after, all these are immaterial. And everything you do, it's going to remain eternally. Nothing is going to be decomposed in the immaterial realm. Nothing is going to end in the immaterial realm. Look how important it is. Moment to moment, how we think, how we act, how we believe, and how we shouldn't sin, and so on and so forth. The point I was trying to make before diverting here was that when you say I, it's multidimensional. Some of these dimensions are more important. Some of these dimensions are eternal in nature, but some, they decompose. The physical dimension is less important. Then we have Urafo making statements. They say, if you take a given action, like salat, most people's salat, or another act of worship, or any other act, when you take it, if you were to dissect it and open it up, they say that it's all huzuzat nafsani. It's all whims of the soul. Allahu Akbar. Look, the Urafo see these things. They just, when you dissect it, this salat was all whims of the soul. Just very, because look, when we say I, this I has been classified and terms have been given to it in different ways. Sometimes the I is called nafs, and in the Quran it uses this term, calling the reality of me, the I, the nafs. And then a classification we have in the Quran is nafsul ammara, nafsul lawama, and nafsul mutma'inna, depending on the status of the I, how it's acted. There are other classifications too that have been extrapolated, but they're mainly in the ahadith, where they say the reality of who we are, the I, they have a different classification. They say if the I is preoccupied with the animal dimension, we call the I, it's at the nafs stage. The ego is predominating. The material side, the natural side of one is overweighing one's spiritual aspect. One is more of an animal than a human. And this is what nafsul ammara in the previous classification is referring to. But sometimes you see that nafs has this other meaning in other classifications. It's not referring to the I itself, it's referring to one dimension of the I when the I is predominated and preoccupied with the animal aspect, with animality. One has to be aware of this when, looking through texts. The Urafo, they say, look, this salat that most people do, it's all just these whims of the soul. If you were to open it up and say, why did you pray? Okay. They say, why did you pray? They would give answers such as, I'm used to it. I can't do without it. Or, it'll increase my prestige before my spouse and family. These are the real reasons why they're doing salat. These are all whims of the soul. It gives me a good feeling. That's why they do salat. I can speak about it with my friends, for example. Sometimes you see gatherings and they speak about their salatul layl, for example. That what a good feeling they had. These are very private things. When you open it up, you see it's these whims of the soul which is constituting the very fabric of their salat. And then there are even other levels. Although these levels that I've just mentioned, these are negative. The next few levels I'll mention are less negative and maybe even positive at step 1 level. When you say, I'm doing salat to go to heaven, for example. I'm doing salat so I don't go to hell. It's not bad, but it's colored with the whims of the soul. You're not doing it for Allah's sake. It's not being done out of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And maybe if you were guaranteed, for example, heaven, or guaranteed not to go to hell, maybe you wouldn't have even approached salat when the guarantee was given. Because that was the reason you were doing it, to go to heaven. And so these people at this stage, Imam Khomeini rahmatullah alayhi in Adab Salat says that there's no wayfaring here. They're not journeying towards Allah. They're journeying towards their ego, their nafs. Salat after salat, fasting after fasting, action after action. They're just journeying towards their nafs, adding on to that more and more, making it stronger and stronger. And then he adds that suluk and wayfaring hasn't in reality even started when people are still suffering at this stage. It doesn't even qualify. And so they say you have to let go of the nafs. You have to let go of this soul at this stage. Let go of it. Otherwise, the journey will never start. True salat will never qualify. With true salat, we have actions of the limbs which are important, and the Sharia discusses those. But those limbs are temporary instruments of yours. They're temporary layers of yours. They're going to decompose one day. But also the salat has immaterial realities that you have to occupy yourself when you're doing it. Mi'raj is an immaterial reality one can attain to in salat. Al-a'malu bin niyat, your intentions, and the khulus behind those intentions, these are immaterial realities. These embrace actions of the limbs. These are actions of the heart. True salat is in relation to this dimension, even though the physical dimension has to be abided by. But if you want to suffice with the physical dimension and compromise with the immaterial dimensions at stake in salat, with khulus, with your intentions, you've lost the plot. You may on the outside look like someone who does all their salat at the first instance. But in reality, it's all hududate nafsani. And then we look in the Holy Quran and we see Allahu Akbar. Many terms are like this in the Holy Quran. For example, jihad in the Holy Quran, it's never mentioned as a physical battling, even though there are many wars mentioned in the Holy Quran. But the term jihad is never mentioned in the context of a physical war. It's mentioned in the context of striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. Those who strive with respect to us, Allah's attributes. Oh, look, what does that mean? Is that a physical endeavor? Or is it an action of the heart? Where do Allah's divine attributes of perfection go? In the hand, or in the face, or in the heart? The physical jihad is also very important. And we see it in the ahadith again, but the Qur'an's priority is this jihad of the heart. This is more important. They're both important, but this is more important. This gives value to the physical jihad. Without it, the physical jihad may take you in the wrong direction, may not make you attain to salvation. Or for example, terms such as taqwa, for example. Taqwa in the Holy Quran. This too. It says, ittaqullah. Have taqwa before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This taqwa meaning not doing the muharramat or doing the wajibat, that's seen in the ahadith. It's important. But the taqwa the Quran is referring to doesn't say ittaqu muharramatillah. It doesn't say ittaqu wajibatillah. Allahu Akbar. Ittaqullah. It means like ihfadhu Allah. Keep, preserve Allah. What do you mean? Which aspect of Allah? Well, Allah, by definition, is that which comprises all attributes of perfection. Keep these attributes of Allah. Where? In your hand? Qalbul mu'min arshur rahman. The heart of the person is the throne of Allah. It's the heart where true taqwa can manifest. Allah is Shafi, Hafid, Alim, Razaq, Wahhab. These have to enter the heart. You have to see it with your heart. Then you have to be it. Ittaqullah. And then there's a discussion that do we have ittaquhu in the Quran? And then what is that referring to? These are important discussions. We'll come to it. But this action of the heart is seen again with taqwa in the Holy Quran. Not taqwa of the limbs. It's not a preventative limb-based bodily taqwa. That's seen in the ahadith. And this is important, it's a precursor to the real taqwa. And it's only when ittaqullah starts does your journeying start. Otherwise, you're not journeying. If there's no ittaqullah, if you're not keeping Allah, if Allah's attributes haven't been incorporated by you, within you, yes, you're still far away. You have to still go through the preliminaries. Now, all these will be explained over time. But this idea of letting go of the nafs, yes, I didn't pay attention to when I started. And I think this clock isn't working anyway, so if someone can just give me a hint when to start the words of bereavement, I'll appreciate it. This idea of letting go of one's nafs. Just let go of it. What does this mean? When the Urafas say, if you open a given action or act of worship of an individual, it's all huzuzat nafsani, it's all whims of the soul. Soul, that nafsa ammara, where the ego is predominating, where the animal side is predominating. Let go of this animal side. Let go of this ego. Let go of this nafsul ammar. Just let go of it. How? The love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما جعل الله من لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. Chapter 33, verse 4. That no, Allah hasn't assigned a person with two hearts within them. This heart, which is the locus through which taqwa is going to be established, and you want to abide by the imperative of ittaqullah, you can't fill it with animalistic traits and traits of the ego. You have to fill it, you can't fill it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't fill it with animalistic whims and traits. Let go of the nafs, the Urafas say. How? Through the loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart, you don't have two hearts. The heart only loves either Allah or it's the dunya. And we have to love Allah. How? Qul, chapter 3, verse 31. Qul, O Prophet, say, a prescription. In kuntum tuhibbun Allah, if you want to love Allah, fattabi'uni. The Prophet is saying this. Allah is saying, tell them that if you want to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow me, the Prophet. Yuhbibkumullah. Allah will then love you. Okay, then what will happen? وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. Then for you, your sins, the side effects of them will be relieved. This ghafara has been translated wrongly in many verses of the Holy Quran, and especially in many stories of the Quran. Ghafara has come, and it's all about being forgiven. You've done a sin, and then you've been forgiven. And since it's about being forgiven, it means you've done something wrong. Then we ascribe these different sins to prophets, na'udhu billah. And we'll give one or two very important examples, especially the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam. These translations that we have are very poisonous, many of them. And explain with the stories of the Quran how we are really, many dangers are arising within the minds of the youth. You love Allah, Allah will love you. What's the protocol? Fattabi'uni, follow me, the Holy Prophet. Follow me. Okay, the Holy Prophet had actions, ethics, states. Let's start from the very beginning. His words, do this, do that. Follow me. Look, don't lose the plot here. It says, let go of the soul. Okay, how? Through the love of Allah. How do we love Allah? If you love Allah, because Allah will love you, then everything will be relieved for you. It's a very important state that will arise. What do we have to do? Follow the Prophet. Which aspect? All aspects start from the beginning. His words, the wajibat and the muharramat. Let go of the soul. The soul wants to eat haram things. The nafs wants to say haram things. The ego wants to hear haram things. at least letting go of the soul, letting go of the nafs. Step one is abiding by the Sharia to the dot. Because when you abide to the dot, it means Allah, you're obeying Allah's commands. It means that you are letting go of the nafsul ammara, which wants many things, but you are abiding by Allah's commands. This is step one. The Sharia, and it's important. How would we know we are succeeding in step one? Someone came to the Holy Messenger and said that, why am I not able to do Salatul Layl? Then the Holy Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, قَيَّدَتْكَ ذُنُوبُكَ. Although that's the operative clause in the sentence, the whole hadith, أَنْتَ رَجُلٌ قَيَّدَتْكَ ذُنُوبُكَ, that you're someone who your sins have restricted you. That's why you don't do Salatul Layl. Now, by this I don't mean for people to, from tonight, those who have never done Salatul Layl or rarely do Salatul Layl now want to do it all the 11 units. No. But at least 2 units. Be awake during the night. And we'll speak about this, the effects of keeping night vigil, how important it is. But if you're not able to do Salatul Layl, it's because you're sinning. It means this step one in the route of loving Allah, it's compromised because you're sinning. Some time ago, I went to Urumiyeh, and the reason was I was in a class the teacher was teaching one of Allama Tabatabawi's books, and it was about shaitan, and then one of the classmates said, there's someone in our village who has seen Iblis and sees Iblis, and he gave stories. And that passed away. And even many years before that, maybe 20 years ago, Ayatollah Haq Shanas, when I would used to attend his weekly lectures in Tehran, he even saw Iblis and gave an account of what happened. And then you see that in the ahadith, those stories and in the Quran, where there's dialogue between the prophets and Iblis. So when you enter dialogue with Iblis, it's a very high status. It's in quotes, prophetic status. So when the class finished, I went to him and said, where are you from? This village? He said, we're from Urumiyeh, which is in West Azerbaijan province in the west of Iran. And I said, can I see this person? And I traveled to Urumiyeh and saw him. His son was a representative of the Wali Faqih in a particular organization. And through him, we went to see his father. Before seeing the father, the representative said to me, look, he's a very ordinary, illiterate individual. He said, he's very ordinary. And he has no literacy. But I said to him, look, this story of Iblis, he has something. Then he said, yes. Now the classmate didn't tell me this. Maybe he didn't know, I don't know. But the son said to me that this person in Urmi has passed away now. It's a year now he's passed away. And he only let me see him that once. I told him, can I see you again? He said, never again, because of a vision he had in Mina during Hajj, that he shouldn't become famous in any way. He said, he's very, very normal. Just whatever he wants from Allah, whenever he sits on a mimbar and the scholar is saying something and he doesn't understand, he wants it from Allah, Allah shows it to him in a vision. Incredible. And it's not as if he's asking every day, but whatever is asked, Allah shows it him in a vision, an apparition, either during his sleep or when he's awake. So I went to him, and it was a good experience for me. He gave many stories and everything, but he couldn't take hold of my hand and guide me. Because for that you need theoretical irfan too. You have to know the language of guidance. These people are guided, but they can't guide necessarily. But when I asked him, and I remembered him when I was speaking of night vigil, what actions would you advise me? He said, for the last 40 years, he's been awake 2 hours at least during the night. 2 hours. But more important than that, he kept on referring to this concept of a ghasb, usurping. Not necessarily the usurping that we see of in Canada, Australia, parts of America, but what you're wearing, for example, what you're eating. See, they shouldn't be usurped. He kept on saying that. Look, this is something that we have in the Risales, in the treatises. And actually the Shia denomination in their books of fiqh, the parts on ghasb is a lot compared to other denominations. And that's not very surprising after the events which followed after the demise of the Holy Messenger. But look, this idea of usurping, he was very sensitive towards. Now when I say, in the past when I say, look, Canada is usurped. You can't build mosques on usurped land. You can't even live on usurped land. You can't do your a'mal on usurped land. Now many people took offense and said, look, it's going to cause a lot of chaos. Well look, this is the whole thing. You have to go through these burdens through the love of Allah. You shouldn't accept it because you're used to it for all your life. These are important things. Now this gentleman was only saying it for very simple things, but he was stressing. He kept on stressing it. And after that one conversation, it had entered me so much and had such an effect that I kept on speaking about usurpation for a number of months in different places. Okay, I'll stop here and inshallah we'll continue tomorrow. Yes, in relation to Muslim ibn Aqil, salamullah alayhi, after the Treaty of Reconciliation that between Muawiyah and Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Kufa was controlled. Sorry. All right, yes. These 10 minutes remains for the speech, but inshallah I'll compensate through these words of bereavement. Kufa was controlled by Muawiyah after the Treaty of Reconciliation. And he had assigned the governor of Kufa. Kufa has a history. And it wasn't a surprise that it became the centralized capital during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, because events were happening in Medina and the companions of the Prophet, even before Kufa became the capital, they were moving to Kufa. There were a lot of migration from different parts, even Medina, because Medina was on the brink of destruction after the demise of the Holy Messenger. So Kufa was a very safe haven, and that's why Amir al-Mu'mineen chose it. Imam Hassan was, alayhi salam, occupied there too, but after the reconciliation, which arose, yes, Muawiyah tried to destroy all traces of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt in Kufa. Nu'man ibn Bashir was assigned as the governor by Muawiyah. Now, we have a governor, the Wali, but we have tribal leaders in Kufa too. And the tribes lived very separate from one another. And there's a history behind that too. They all lived at a distance. They didn't all live together. And even the doors of Masjid al-Kufa, there were 7 doors. Each door was opening to one tribe, in the direction of that tribe. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was the Basra governor. But the tribal leaders, Muawiyah didn't do much there. He didn't change the tribal leaders unless the leader of the tribe stood out in his love for Amir al-Mu'mineen. There he would change it. Otherwise, if they didn't show anything, he didn't have much to do with the tribal leaders, like Hani ibn Urwa, for example, and others. But if a given tribe leader would show affinity, disclose affinity to Amir al-Mu'mineen, yes, he would change them and even punish them. After Muawiyah passed away, the tribal leaders of Kufa, not accepting Yazid at all, and accepting Muawiyah out of respect of the reconciliation treaty which was made with Imam Hassan alayhi salam, not respecting Muawiyah but rather respecting that treaty, they wrote letters, maybe around 50, and each letter that they wrote had hundreds of signatures. And this was sent to Imam Hussein after the death of Muawiyah in the year 60. And then Imam Hussein alayhi salam wanted to make sure and to seal that final hujjah and proof for all. He said, I want to send someone to look at the environment there before the uprising becomes a duty here. You know, there's a difference of opinion in relation to what was the main trigger which made Imam Hussein start the uprising. Shahid Mutahari says it was Amr bil Ma'ruf, and that's why he says when the Kufans ended up how they ended and rejected Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Imam Hussein still continued because of Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahy az Munkar. Shahid Sadr says it was the invitation of the Kufans which was the main cause of Imam Hussein's uprising. Now, who was right, who was wrong? Maybe one was right microcosmically, the other was right macrocosmically when looking at the whole picture. It's in their books, there's differing opinions. So here, Muslim ibn Aqil, who was the cousin of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, had the honor to be sent to Kufa by who? A Waliullah such as Imam Hussein, a Ma'soom such as Imam Hussein. So it meant he had this inner worth and capacity and merit to be given such an important duty. We have traditions that even before the birth of Muslim, the Holy Messenger said to Amir al-Mu'mineen that I like Aqil, who was the father of Muslim, for 3 reasons. Because he's your brother, Ali. Aqil, was the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ja'far, Aqil, Ali. I like him for 3 reasons. One was because he's your brother. One, because he's the son of Abu Talib. But one reason, the third reason, was why he liked him. Inna waladahu la maqtulun fi mahabbati waladik. That verily his son, Aqil's son, is going to be killed for the love, in the way of loving your son, referring to Imam Hussein. Look, this was even before Muslim was born. This idea that the only thing which is important is the love of Hussein, this is true. This is only true when you're ready to give your life for Hussein. That kind of love, not just the regurgitating one. So Muslim ibn Aqil was given this duty, this mission. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was then, in addition to being governor of Basra, he was made governor of Kufa. Because Nu'man ibn Bashir, albeit assigned by Muawiyah, he was very weak. The Kufans managed to boycott his congregational and Friday prayers. Yazid wanted something drastic to be done. And there were, he would do, and his propaganda machine would do many things. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And I've listed a number of them just to see why the environment in Kufa, within a very short period of time, everything reversed. One was that Ubaydullah said to the Kufans, Yazid has assigned me, and my sword and whip is going to encounter anyone who goes against the order of the Caliph, Yazid, for example. So people were scared of that. They would kill relentlessly. There were rumors that there's an army from Syria, from Sham rather, coming towards Kufa to eliminate any traces of uprisings that may arise. This was a very severe rumor because the Kufans still remembered what happened in Siffin. Siffin, tens of thousands of people died. Battle between Muawiyah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. It was a very bad battle. All battles are bad, but the memories of Siffin were still fresh. When they said the army from Sham is coming, here, even the women of the household, the men, they said, look, let's distance ourselves. Let's distance ourselves. This is getting serious. They were scared. It's like applies a lot today in the West. How the Muslims are scared of the authorities in the West and can't say anything or are scared to say things. Then Ubaydullah looked at the tribal leaders. He would change the tribal leaders, some of them, and then tell them to give provide him with lists of those who have affinity towards Ahlul Bayt and those who have affinity towards Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this so that they can get rid of those elements. He would send, in addition to the changing of the tribal leaders, spies on individual level, spies to provide different information. He would control the borders, who comes in and who exits Kufa. He would kill the supporters, staunch supporters, such as Maysam Tammar, who was hung. Although when we say someone was hung in those days, it's not with a rope or they're not crucified either. They just hang them on a column of wood for 3 days and they would die. And he had a very bad death because he was tortured and his tongue was amputated. So they would kill the fervent supporters. They would imprison many supporters. Mukhtar was one of those. That's why Mukhtar wasn't present in Karbala. and so on and so forth. These were all happening. Muslim enters Kufa and goes and sees Mukhtar, who hadn't been imprisoned at that time, and also sees Hani ibn Urwa. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad gets to know through the spies that Muslim is in the residence of Hani. Now this is a very important theme, and there's some controversy here. And I don't want to pretend, one side is categorically more accurate than others. It's history. History you can't give a narrative of history with one hadith, with one book of history. With history, there has to be a lot of evidences, and it has to reach a level where you have yaqeen. Many of the particular details that we see with the story of Imam Hussein from beginning to end, we can't say it's 100%. But there's a main axis upon which these events happen. That axis is accurate, and that's mainly because of the many ahadith that we have and some books of history. Some historians, they don't accept books after the 4th century. Whatever is in the books after the 4th century, if it wasn't seen or observed in the books in the first 3 centuries, they won't accept it. Look, history is a science. It has its own rules and prescriptions, and it's a science with its own principles. You can't just, if something, a historical point about Karbala, you see it in a book in the 9th century, but it didn't exist before then, there may be a question mark there. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen. If someone like Sayyid ibn Tawus writes it, you know that he had all the books before him. Even though we don't have access to those books that he had for whatever reason. But someone like him, you would then be slower at rejecting that narrative. And that's why luhuf is a very important maqtal, for example, in the maqtals of Imam Hussein. In relation to this, when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad realized that Muslim is visiting the residence of Hani, he said, and the spies had informed him, he said, I want to see Hani, because Hani was ill at the time. I want to pay a visit and see Hani. Now Muslim was there, and he had considered assassinating Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. We have this in certain texts of history. Whether it's at a level where we have yaqeen, I don't know. But it's an important point. He wanted to assassinate Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Things may have changed, but things may not have. The women of the household of Hani requested that he doesn't do such a thing. That's how history narrates it. If that's the case, here Muslim is faced with two conflicting duties. One is the women are saying not to kill him, and you have to respect being a guest at the house. You have to respect them. But the other is that Ubaydullah is a blasphemer. He's definitely a Sabbul Hussein alayhi salam. You have to kill him. It's a duty. And then when there's a conflict between two duties in usul tazahum, you have to take the aham, that which is more important. The blasphemy element is much more important here. Now, but he didn't kill him. He didn't kill Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. We know that this event happened in the month of Dhul Hijjah, which is one of the 4 haram months. That may be one reason why. But you can't say it was only because the women said so. That's not enough. Because it was the month of Dhul Hijjah, it's a holy month, you can't start a killing. Whether that outweighs the sin of blasphemy, well, Muslim Ibn Aqil, he ascertained this. He didn't go ahead with it. Now, in the stories, we have statements that he says that it's an odd statement, and this can't lead to one's certainty. That he said, the Holy Messenger said that in our way, we don't kill people out of those who are not paying attention, or they are inadvertent to us, and then we kill them without them knowing. It's not a battle, behind their backs. We don't do that. If that was to be substantiated through texts, albeit historical texts, if it leads to that threshold of certainty, so be it. But the thing is, it doesn't. So therefore, it's a theory. And this is also a theory that it happened in the month of Dhul Hijjah. I don't want to start anything. Well, what if it wasn't in the month of Dhul Hijjah? Would he have done it? Or there are stories where Shimr was shown to Imam Hussein. And someone said to him, shall I get rid of this Khabith right now, when in Karbala? Imam Hussein, this was in Muharram, a month of Haram, one of the 4 months of Haram. Imam Hussein said, we don't start anything. Look, we have these kind of indicators too. This idea of Jihad Ibtida'i, we start. If you look at the story of Sulaiman and the Queen of Sheba, if you analyze it, there's a case for it. That it is allowed. But whatever is allowed doesn't mean they would do it. Ahlul Bayt would never start. All the wars that they had was defensive. So this is also one element that historians discuss with one another. Then one night, and then Ubaydullah left and Muslim didn't go ahead with the assassination. And one of the reasons why it can't be this idea that he said this, there's a hadith from the Holy Prophet who said that, was, well, he knew that before Ubaydullah was coming. If that was the case, he wouldn't have even intended to assassinate Ubaydullah. Anyway, one night in the mosque, the holy mosque of Kufa, it was Maghrib time and the people prayed with Muslim Ibn Aqil. In the mosque, most of you have been in the Kufa mosque, that very mosque that is still there. And he prayed there. And there were many people there. When he came out of the mosque, he's still in the courtyard. Only 30 people accompanied him. And then when he approached the Kinder gate, Babul Kinder, there were 10. When he exited the courtyard, there was no one. This, the propaganda machine of Ubaydullah made this happen. People were scared. We shouldn't be surprised if the authorities in the UK, the US, tells the Muslims, you can't do this, you can't. You can be sure 99.9% of the Muslims will just say, okay, no problem. They're scared. These people were scared. The rumors, the threats, the killings, they were scared. Some people, when you speak of the love of Hussein, they only say it in a state of wudu. They're embarrassed to speak of the love of Hussein in a state where they're not in a state of wudu. You can't downgrade what this love of Hussein means. They were scared. They were weak. Their iman was weak. And what makes it even more difficult is, okay, Mukhtar was in prison. Maysam Tammar, where was Habib? Habib ibn Madahir, he was a Kufan. This is a question that many have. Because we know he was definitely, he wouldn't be scared. We know his life story. We know who Habib was. Historians have answered that he wasn't there, or he didn't know with the entrance when Muslim ibn Aqil entered Kufa. As I said, Kufa, the tribes, there were different tribes and they lived far apart. So this is why maybe he wasn't aware. But anyway, he was all alone, Muslim ibn Aqil. It's a very frightening environment, really, when you think about it. And he doesn't know Kufa. He's from Bani Hashim. He doesn't know, especially how the tribes live very far apart from one another. He doesn't know where the avenues and the alleys and all these things are. And he was all alone. Now, how do we know he was all alone? Who reported that? When he went through these alleys and avenues in Kufa all alone, looking for some kind of refuge, who gave this report? The historians say someone by the name of Bajaji, who stayed from behind or just surveying. He was under his surveillance. One person. And then he gave the report to the authorities. And then when he was all alone, suddenly he enters this alley and there's a woman outside. Now the Kufa was under martial law, but this woman was outside because she was waiting for her son. And she was a bit stressed, waiting for her son. Muslim ibn Aqil went, saw this woman, and stopped and said, Salamun alaikum. Maybe she can provide some kind of refuge or some kind of help. Now the woman, you can imagine, she didn't know who Muslim was. She was very, she would act out of prudence. They don't speak with the opposite sex that easily. And Muslim said, can you bring some water? And Taw'eh went and brought some water, gave it to Muslim, went into the house, came out looking for the son, and then saw Muslim is still there. Now this is a bit uncomfortable. What's this man doing here? She may even have, a negative thought that, God forbid, it's the mahram, non-mahram things and on that line. Then Muslim, according to some reports, introduced himself. Then she opened her heart and said, you come here, and showed the way, provide refuge. And the story the son came and realized that someone is there, was suspicious, it was Muslim, reported it to the authorities came, Ubaydullah sent the soldiers in the morning, and so on and so forth, and they took him eventually after some resistance. When they were taking him to the palace, Muslim was looking around. Now there's different reports here, but he was looking around to find someone from Bani Hashim. And the only one, because the Kufans were from different tribes, they weren't from Bani Hashim. And he found Umar ibn Sa'd, who was not the best of figures, but he was the son of Abi Waqqas, son of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, who was one of the founders with Salman of Kufa. Kufa, the establishment of Kufa was in the time of Omar, and it has a story behind it. No one was living there. They established Kufa, and then it grew and grew. But Umar ibn Sa'd was from Bani Hashim. Muslim ibn Aqil was from Bani Hashim. And he approached him and said, my life is coming to an end. I want 3 things from you. These 3 things, please just do them, because I'm worried. The first was, when they kill me, bury me. Don't let them disrespect the body, or just quickly bury me wherever you can. And unfortunately, that wasn't really abided by. When he was thrown from the palace roof, then they dragged his body with horses along, the dead body dragged along the floor. So they weren't very loyal in relation to this first thing he wanted. The second thing he wanted was that I have a debt upon my shoulders. Sell my sword and armor and pay this debt off to X person. God knows if that was done by Umar ibn Sa'd, because Umar ibn Sa'd took these three requests, took it to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. So you can't really expect. He shouldn't have took it. They were both from Bani Hashim. At least this much, he could have been loyal. But the third was take this letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this letter, tell him not to come to Kufa. I was wrong. The Kufans have turned their backs. And that letter wasn't taken either. It was only afterwards when someone met up with Imam Hussein and informed him of the shahada of Muslim ibn Aqil, but by then he had exited Mecca and the journey was made. Allah la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin.